All right. Is anybody there? Anybody care? Anybody listening? Hope so. All right. So,
we're still here.
Yay. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a demo of Pantheon's integrated composer for Drupal 9 and beyond sites. Actually, I think it actually even works for, there's a WordPress composer template that it works with as well. So as of this week, it's in limited availability, which means, so here's what we learned the hard way yesterday. If you go to your Pantheon dashboard, if you're logged into Pantheon, blah, 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 all that stuff. And you go to create a new site. And I can't show it to you, but after you fill out this, you go to the next screen, it shows you what kind of site do you want. Do you want a Drupal 7 site, a Drupal 8 site, or a WordPress site? One of the options is not Drupal 9. When it does come out of quote unquote limited availability, it will appear on that page. So limited availability, think of it as a beta test, things might still change. But it looks very promising. And it's a little bit different. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the easier example. There's a couple ways to do this. One way I can do this is kind of what we did with what I normally do in class, is where I start with a local site. Use your, the Drupal recommended project composer template, get a local site up and running, and then move that up to a new Pantheon or Acquia environment. That's how the handout is. That's how I traditionally do it in class, because I think that's a very realistic way of doing things. You usually start a new project on your local, at least I do, and then you want to push it up somewhere. I don't want to take the time to go through that for this because things might change. And then I write up curriculum or I record videos and then they're no longer accurate. So I want to wait till things are stable before I do that one, because that's the more in-depth example. This example is going to be, I don't have any site, any code anywhere yet, but I want to start a new project. I know I want to use Pantheon. So I'm going to start the site on Pantheon. And then I'm going to bring that site down to my local. And the end result is still going to be the same. I'm going to have a local environment. I'm going to have a Pantheon dev environment and stage environment. So I don't know if everybody has access to this. I think maybe you do, because it seems like it's a pretty public URL. Like if you go to their documentation page, you look up their documentation on integrated composer, that's what they're calling this. In order to get a new integrated composer, you basically have to use this link, which is a dashboard link, but it's got the special upstream ID, which gets you the Drupal 9 composer, integrated composer upstream. So that's what I'm going to do. So, shoot, I don't want to do that. I don't see, they tell me. Every time I see this little logo, I expect it to open up in a new tab. So let me make sure it opens in a new tab. And this will send me to a page that looks very similar to the one we were just looking at, only it's locked to Drupal 9. So I'm going to call this Drupal, let's see, DCO D9. I'm going to do P2 for 0.2 because I've already done one of these today with the name DCO D9. So just have to make the name a little bit different. I'll put this under Anello Consulting. I am in the US. And again, if I were to create a live environment, that basically just means that my company is responsible for the bill. That's all that this is going to do. But we do want the one-click composer updates for Drupal 9, the integrated composer upstream. And I agree to put it under Anello Consulting. And I talked about this yesterday in class, but all Pantheon sites have an upstream. That's kind of like the starting point, or actually it's more than the starting point. It's like the, you can have a Drupal 7 upstream, a Drupal 8 upstream, or a WordPress upstream. It's like, what is the foundational code base for your site? So in this case, the foundational code base is going to be this Drupal 9 with integrated composer. And this is going to take a couple minutes, just like any other brand new Pantheon site. And I thought about this a bit today. Even if we did this yesterday on Breck's screen, it's a completely different process for pushing a local code base up to Pantheon for Drupal 9. The template looks a lot different. Well, it does and it doesn't, which if we have time today, and if anyone's interested, I don't want to bore people, but we could talk, I can show the composer template, and I haven't fully gone, today was the first time I really dove into it. So I have somewhat of an understanding of what I'm looking at, but I haven't really done a rigorous, line by line accounting of it. I'm actually going to pause the recording since I think this takes like another 5 minutes, and this would be really boring on the recording. So let me do that. And I promise on the recording, I won't skip anything. All right. So Pantheon is done. So let's go to the dashboard. And there's some additional instructions here. So let's just kind of review them. Here's Breck's favorite step. Get your site in SFTP mode and then install. We're going to do that. And then go back to the Git mode. And then at that point, we can clone it locally. So it's really straightforward. I mean, all these steps are really straightforward. So we're already in SFTP mode, so we don't really have to change. So this step over here where it says set it, well, it's already set. So maybe it should say confirm the site is set to SFTP mode, which it is. So let's go to our Drupal 9 site, latest version of Drupal 9, and let's just go through. And what the heck, we'll go the opposite direction of minimal. We'll go to the demo content, which is Umami. Demonstration purposes only. So sure, okay. This installs a whole bunch of stuff, a whole bunch of content and pictures and stuff, but it's pretty to look at. So figure we'll do the polar opposite of what we did with Breck earlier. The quick edit module I normally disable, shortcut module I normally disable. I wait till a client asks for it, and then I say, oh, well, that'll be about 4 hours worth of work. And then I go hit the checkbox and the extend button and charge them. I don't do
not your long-term.
No, not mine. No, right? Only clients I don't like. like Matt and people like that. So. No, I actually had a long, this is recorded, so I probably shouldn't. I had a long talk about integrity with someone the other day.
Is his last name Anello as well?
His last name might be Anello as well, yes. I didn't say it's a him. Their last name might be Anello. But I used work examples for that. I forgot this takes so long with Umami. It's a multilingual site as well. So, guess we should have done standard. Oh well.
Mike, does that work when you're trying to talk to your kids and you relate everything to websites? Do they get the analogies?
You know what? It doesn't matter what I relate it to. If it's my voice and it's coming out of my face, it doesn't matter. It doesn't. It really. I can't tell you how much I feel like the teacher from Charlie Brown.
It's not just you.
I know, just the way it is. We have good friends who I happened to run into last night, and they have children roughly the same age, and it's like we'll see them, well, not during COVID times, but outside of COVID times, we'll normally get together with them like once a month and just hang out and have a meal or something, and like we live like parallel lives. The good and the bad. It's hysterical. And so last night I ran into them and told them what was going on. And they were like, oh my gosh, that sounds exactly like what's going on at our house, except the topic is this and not that. All right, so I'm going to just change the site name here just to DrupalEasy. Okay, and then I'm just going to do example.com so I never have to get any email addresses. And I don't care about this password too much because, well, here, let me actually, I'm just going to use admin for now because I'm going to blow away the site afterwards.
Hey, speaking of not getting emails, did you ever check out that phone number?
Oh, I did. Yeah. I did. And let's not talk about it because I plan on getting as many people with it as possible. I'm going to pay that forward. So. All right. So while that's going, I'm going to actually come over here and go to security and lock it with, y'all can guess what that is, although it's not going to last that long. I'm going to put this back in Git mode as well. Where'd my site go? Something's happening. Let's just hope I'm not doing too many things at once. I wonder, oh, it's because I put it in Git mode too early. Oh, silly. This is what I get for rushing things. What? Where are my buttons? No, I don't have any buttons. Man, this lesson is just cursed for me. Oh my gosh. I'm going to remove lesson 6 from the curriculum from now on. Unbelievable. That's what I get for multitasking.
It's not you, it's Pantheon.
Yeah, let's blame it on Pantheon.
Let's blame it on Acquia.
Yeah, there's the easy target right there.
Hey now.
Yeah, I put it in Slack earlier. I don't know if everybody saw it, but I was gonna like set up a whole Acquia Cloud remote repository demo, but they changed their policy where there's no more free time-limited environments. So I can't create one unless I give them money or talk to one of their salespeople. So I reached out to some folks I know at Acquia to see if I can't get an exception for myself to that rule so I can teach. Maybe
I imagine that got real expensive without conversions.
I mean, Pantheon kind of does the same thing. I mean, for free. I mean, they don't require, they're time limited. So whatever. It's fine. It's just a moving, the goalposts for this lesson are always moving. All right, let's see what's happening here with the reload. I really hope I don't have to go through the entire installer again. If I do, we're not using umami. I'll tell you that right now. We're going back to minimal. It's taking its time. It's kind of moving. I'll put my cursor right on it, make sure that yellow line moves. Oh, look at that. All right, close enough. Good. All right, I'll take it. All right. So, I'm just because I'm greedy, I'm gonna go to the status report. I'm just gonna look at the status report here. Experimental media update. Okay, so nothing red. All right, so, all right, I can live with that. All right, so now let's go back to Git mode. All right, so it went through that. That's fine. No problem with those. It's just a temporary site. Go back to Git mode, and then I'm gonna create a backup. And then that'll be it on Pantheon for a few minutes while I get my local up and going. So I haven't had time to research this, but maybe someone who uses Pantheon knows. Does anybody know if Pantheon has support for changing the default branch name from master to main. I ask because I fear that if I change it, then the dev environment isn't automatically going to pull from main. It's always going to look for master. So if anyone has any experience or knowledge of that, let me know. Otherwise, at some point, I will look that up. All right, let me come here and try and make a backup. I'm going to put that on my to-do list for this weekend. Oh, look at that. Look at that, Breck. Are you jealous? Is Breck still here? He's still. Look at that. Are you jealous?
I am.
All right. So we have a site up and running in Pantheon. We made a backup. Woohoo. All right. We don't have anything on local though. Wah, wah, wah. All right. Obviously, there's no, there's no DCO D9 P2 site. So let's get it. Let's clone it. So in this case, we're just, Pantheon gives us the whole URL. And as long as, you've got your SSH keys up there and you created the site and stuff, you should be able to come here. And for the git clone command, this whole thing is the address of the repository. And then this bit at the very end basically says, clone this repository and put it in a new folder inside of the current directory, which is, currently my DCO directory. Put it inside of the DCO directory in a new folder named this. So the end result is we're going to have a folder with some code, underneath this one. And this shouldn't take that long because it's a repository without any dependencies in it. So ls-al, sure enough, there it is. CD that. Oh, I don't want to do that. CD DCO D9P2 ls-al. So let's take a look at this. We have a composer JSON composer.lock. We have a web directory, but notice there's no vendor directory. We have this weird upstream configuration thing, which as we have time, maybe I'll go into this a little bit. This is what I'm still, this is like the new stuff, how they're working with Drupal 9. But if we look inside of web, notice there's nothing. Well, other than sites, but there's no core directory, there's no modules directory, there's no theme directory. So we don't really have a site yet. And the instructions basically tell us that the next step is to run, and after you clone it, run Composer install. Well, if you have Composer installed on your machine, which I do, you could run Composer install at this point, but I want to run Composer install from a DDEV context inside of DDEV or inside of Lambda or inside of Doxel. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do a DDEV config first. Notice there's no, this is brand new. I just cloned it. So there's no DDEV directory yet. I haven't done anything with DDEV yet for this. So let's do a DDEV config. And this time we're going to have to pay attention to the questions. The project name is good, but because I don't have any code yet, it can't sniff around and figure out what kind of site this is. So it doesn't know that the web is eventually going to be the doc root. So I have to tell it. The doc root location is going to be the web directory. And there's not really any Drupal 9 code here. It's kind of, it's buried inside of composer.json. It's actually buried inside of here. So it's guessing that this is a PHP project. So I'm going to tell it that it's Drupal 9, which is one of the supported project types in DDEV. So DDEV will happily still, do the settings.ddev.php stuff. So that's good. So let's do a DDEV start. And this will spin up our, create some new containers, spin up those containers as it normally does. All right, so the next step, I'm not going to run it yet because let's poke around some things first. The next step is the composer install, and we're going to be able to do that, just like this in a moment. But before we do, the first thing I did earlier today, when I went through this exercise, was my big question was, is this using the Drupal/recommended project composer template, right? That's the one I teach. That's the best practice. That's the one I'm hoping to see or see something related to that. So, I'm going to look at the composer file. And I don't see exactly that. So the composer template is this Pantheon upstream thing, which, I can change its name and description now that I've taken over. Its requirements are Drush, and then this other upstream configuration dependency, which, what's that? I don't know. So let's come back to that. The rest of it looks pretty similar. Here's all of our composer installers, installer path stuff. This is the same that's in the recommended project template. There's some patching stuff, and that's fine. It's not anything too crazy. Here's Drupal scaffolding stuff. So this is what we normally see. We normally see this in the recommended project. This actually has some additional information as well. And then there's some config down here. So it's definitely a little bit different, but the big thing is, hey, wait a minute, where's Drupal core recommended? Where's Drupal/core composer scaffold? Where's composer installers? Because clearly it's going to be using composer installers. So without going too deep into composer, this dependency right here is actually inside of the code base. It's like, what's that movie Scream, where the woman's on the phone, picks up the phone and says the killer's inside the house, right? It's the same thing. The dependency is inside the code base. And I know that because it has this funky extra repository in here. That's a path repository that basically says this dependency lives inside this URL in this project, in the current project. All right, so that being said, that's this thing right here, upstream configuration. So and this is where we're going kind of off outside of my knowledge because I haven't dug deep enough into it. Here's what I think is going on. I think the way Pantheon is built is that every site must have an upstream, right? Up to Drupal 9, every site had an upstream, WordPress, Drupal 7, Drupal 8, right? One of those upstreams. With Drupal 9, if it's going to be a composer-based workflow, having a traditional upstream is tricky. So I think what Pantheon decided to do was have an upstream, but it's kind of like an embedded upstream. It's a base code thing, a basic foundation of code, but it's defined inside of your project, and by inside of the project, inside of this directory. So if we look inside there, sure enough, we see another composer.json. And if we look at that composer.json, this stuff looks familiar, right? Those are the big three dependencies, the same ones that are in Drupal core recommended project or Drupal/recommended project composer template. So once I saw that, I'm like, oh, okay. So this is where core is coming from. This is where the core composer scaffold is coming from. This is composer installers. These are the big three. Remember, there's a fourth one in the recommended project, which is the core project message, which you don't really need anyway. So, and then, so this is composer patches, which isn't part of the core the recommended project template, but a lot of people use this one. So Pantheon just included it. This is another one that a lot of folks use. I don't think it's super necessary using Composer version 2. It basically just makes some Drupal-y Composer things faster. And then this is the big one. This is an interesting one. This is the one that allows Pantheon to inject all of the Pantheon specific files. So yesterday during class, we talked about the pantheon.yaml file. And we talked about the settings.pantheon.yaml, settings.pantheon.php file. this dependency provides those files to our code base. So it's actually quite elegant, and I'm really glad that I took the time to find this, because I'd be hard pressed to find anything to criticize about any of this yet. As a Drupal developer who loves best practices, who loves the Drupal core recommended, I'm sorry, I keep saying core recommended, it's Drupal / recommended project template. This is, as long as I see these three things, I'm happy, because these are the same three main things that are in that composer template. And this basically is showing that Pantheon is keeping the best practices and doing this in as far as I can tell so far, a really good way. So that being said, and Brian, I see your question. I should be finished here in a couple minutes. So all that being said, if I do a DDev composer install, keep in mind what's happening here. So that's going to look at these two files for the manifest. And so it's going to install all the dependencies listed in here. One of the dependencies listed in here is this. And then therefore, all of the dependencies listed in here are going to get installed, which is Drupal core and all the Symfony, Guzzle, and all that stuff. So it's like a little bit of an extra layer, but I think, and again, this is where I'm not 100% sure, I think Pantheon has to do this way because every Pantheon site has to have an upstream. So I think they kind of manufactured this upstream. And there's probably some advantages for doing it. I'm not exactly sure what they are yet, but I'm confident that there are. But they manufactured a way of doing it while also having everything in the same code base, which is nice, in my opinion. So if we do a DDev composer install on my local, here comes all the Drupal core stuff, and we'll see here in a second, Drupal core 9.1.6. We'll pause that. There it is. There's Drupal core coming in. And so keep in mind, the whole idea behind this is that we do not have to commit dependencies to this repo. So every time we make a push up to Pantheon, those commits will go into the Pantheon repo. And then when any Pantheon environment pulls in commits from that repo, internally, Pantheon will run a composer install. We don't have to tell it to run it. I'm pretty sure that, if we look at, actually, I'll show you in a second. I'm pretty sure in the pantheon.yaml, it says that there is I forget what the phrase they use, but this is a site where composer install needs to be run on every pull. So I'm really happy with what I've seen so far. And the more I play with it, I'll share more and document it in the handout. So this weekend, I'm going to document this process in the handout. Like I said earlier, I have all the screenshots. I took a bunch of notes, but now I just got to write it up. Here comes Drush. There's the core composer scaffold running. So at this point, keep in mind, on my local, all I have is the code base. So I'm back here. Now, I already have it installed on Pantheon Dev. So I don't want to install it here, because if I install it here, then the site UUID on Pantheon Dev will be different than the site UUID on my local, and I won't be able to do things like push configuration around. So rather than running through the installer here, I'm basically going to come up to Pantheon. I'm going to go to my backups. I'm going to download that database. And Breck, this is pretty much where you can pick up on your site. This is what I was going to do on your site.
Okay.
Download that database, if it lets me. If it errors out here, then we know it's the Pantheon's having some issues. I guess I'm going to need to get the files directory as well, since I did Miami and it's got all those images. Seriously, Pantheon, you got to be kidding me. Come on. All right, I'm going to be patient. Take some deep breaths. It's good for the soul.
That's a long time for 1.2 megabytes.
Well, it should give me a little URL. It should give me like the download URL. I'm gonna do files. That was the extent of my patience. That was about 45 seconds, I think. Oh my gosh. What the hey now is going on?
Pantheon just out to get you.
It really is. I feel I'm
I think you
starting to
need the
feel-
little,
What's that, Terry?
you need the puppy filter on, so when you're making that whining sound,
I feel like it's a test. I'm being tested. You know, sometimes life is difficult and say that you're being tested. That's what I feel like is going on right now. I'm being tested. All right, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna reload. Ah, there's the problem. I got logged out. Okay, all right. Nice of them to tell me. Okay. Still on the same right side. Okay, let's try that again. Yeah, that's much better. All right, direct download. Yes, and let me do the files directory, direct download as well. All right, so if I go to ls-al home downloads, I should have, yeah, there we go. There's the database. And anything looks, oh, there, no, that's not it. Did I not download it?
that last file in your directory was the same date and timestamp.
This one?
Yeah, they're both 1632.
Yeah, but why is it? Let me look at my Finder. It's a text file. What? Let me try.
List your
re-downloading that.
directory again. It might have been in the middle of the download.
It's just Pantheon. Just it's the same thing. What the heck? It's a 3.1 megabyte text file. It's not on the screen I'm showing right now. It says it's a text edit document. That's a big lie. All right, let's see what it looks like in text edit then. It's going to be, yeah, it's clearly not a text edit document. All right, well, here, you know what? Forget it. I'm not going to worry about the files directory. I've had it with Pantheon today. All right, but so what do I have? I have, I'm going to drag this in the database dump into the site. Off screen, I'm going to do that. All right, I just did that. So now if we do an ls-al, here is the database dump that I just downloaded from Pantheon. So in DDev, Lando, Doxel, you know, they all have an import DB command. So let's import that database to local. And because we downloaded a database from Pantheon and we're importing that database in, now the same site UUID is everywhere. So just to be sure of things, let's do a CR. And okay, and then we'll come over here. And so this is the local ddev.site. That's my local. I'm going to reload this page and it should say Drupal's already installed. Drupal's already installed. View your existing site. And this should be umami without all the pictures because I did not import the files directory. Sure enough, and if we log in, and I think I made it admin, right? I hope I did. Yep, but if I go to configuration, basic site settings, it's clearly the same site name. All right, so now I would have done this in class. So normally what I do is I like to put my sites in order of lowest to highest. So I always have my local site, the tab first, and this is just a very anal retentive thing, I understand, but it's good practice, I think. And then the remote site is to its right. right? So here's our local version. Here's our remote version. So now let's make a code change to local and push that up, right? Because that's the whole point. So we're going to do a DDev composer require Drupal admin toolbar. Let's add the admin toolbar module. And honestly, in real life, I wouldn't have downloaded that files directory anyway. I would install stage file proxy, which we're going to talk about in class still. So we will get to that. So I'm not normally in the habit of moving files directories around, but what we just saw with Pantheon and that file name, that's just crazy. So I'm not sure what's going on with that. And I should have changed my DDev config to Composer 2. I'm hoping the next version of DDev defaults to Composer 2. That would be nice. All right, so I want to go through this exercise because I really want to hammer home the point. This is a Git repository without dependencies. Drink some water. And Brian will definitely have time for your search question in a couple minutes. All right. So before I even do any Git stuff, let's come to my local DDev site. Let's go to extend. Let's go to toolbar and get admin toolbar enabled just to show that we did in fact download that module. All right, so while that's enabling, let's come over here and do a git status. All right, so this is the beauty of not having to commit dependencies. So let me do one thing first. So we can ignore this database dump, right? We're never going to put this in the repo. Now I failed to add the DDev stuff to the repo. I should have done that, before I started this one. So let me just do that separately. So I'm doing git add websites default settings.php because that adds the conditional include, and then git add.ddev. So we have a git status. We're adding just a couple of DDev files, git commit -m added DDev config. All right, git status. So if I had done that before, the act of doing a composer require admin toolbar, it only modifies these two little text files. Right? These are the only things we have to push, even though, deep inside of web modules contrib, web modules where is what web modules? Why is it in a composer directory? What's that composer directory? Oh, that's interesting. So I didn't notice this before, but this must be part of the Pico composer.json, the composer installer rules for this. Oh yeah, look at that. It puts contributed modules inside of a composer directory. So I think it's doing this so that maybe you can delineate between modules installed with Composer and modules not installed with Composer. I mean, it's fine. I don't know the logic behind it, but that's a little bit of a change from what we saw in the recommended project template. But still, here's all the admin toolbar code, right? Inside of there. And clearly, we don't need to add that to our repository because everything we need to exactly duplicate all this is captured in these two. So we can just do a git add composer.json, composer.lock, git status, git commit, added admin toolbar module. spelled it right. And before, well, here, let me do this. And just to prove that I don't have anything up my sleeve, let's go to extend and just confirm that on the Pantheon dev site, admin toolbar doesn't exist yet. No admin toolbar yet. So let's come over here and let's do a push. Git push origin master. So this is going to push our 2 commits up to Pantheon. So it takes a little bit longer because it has to go through that composer install. So come over here and we should see that happening. So David, you got your question all in order? It sounds like.
Yeah, 2 quick things. I've got one is just a show and tell.
Are these Carla quick or are these normal quick?
No, normal quick.
Okay.
One's about 20 seconds and the other is probably about a minute.
All right, I'll start the stopwatch. Fantastic. So on our local, we now have drop downs. File to save. Oh, so this is a translations issue, but I'm not going to worry about that. That's from you, Manny. So composer unlock added by Pantheon. Why am I seeing? I'm not. Oh, it's still going. And I'm waiting. There we go. Okay, so there's the DDev config we added. There's the admin toolbar module. So now if we go back to the Pantheon dev and do a reload, toolbar, they exist there. Notice they're not enabled here because that's configuration, which in the current DCO class we'll learn in a few weeks. But the modules now exist there, which is all they really should based on what we just did. All right, I think that's a good place to stop though. Any questions about that? So I'm going to give us a B+ for today. I think for the most part, we rectified what happened in the end of class yesterday. Other than the fact we can't generate, Pantheon refuses to generate a database export on Breck's machine. Other than that, we did that. And then we also did a full bonus demo of the Drupal 9 stuff. So, all right, I'm going to stop the recording.